It's a mega successful TV show that ran for 11 years. Based on a war that was cancelled after 3 seasons due to poor ratings, it was nominally a comedy that featured doses of heavy drama over the course of its run, and became one of the most beloved television series ever.
I don't hear nothing. Wait for it!
MASH. TV comedies based on a movie had long been staples of schedules, though the majority would usually elicit a yawn from viewers, and very few would last more than a few seasons at best.
On the other hand, I really don't give a what happens.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, several film-to-television projects would show up at the start of a new TV season, but very few ever remained on the schedules at the start of the following season. Successful translations from other media, like The Odd Couple, were few and far between, and most quickly disappeared into the ether. MASH was different.
Animals.
First though, there was the Korean War in the 1950s, and then a popular 1968 book released under the pen name of Richard Hooker, based on Richard Hornberger's experiences as a drafted surgeon in a mobile army surgical hospital in Korea during that war. The book was adapted into a screenplay and turned into a lowish budget feature by director Robert Altman and released by 20th Century Fox in 1970. And it was a hit, out-earning both of Fox's other bigger budgeted war movies that year, Patton and Tora Tora Tora.
Oh, kiss my hot lips.
Lips. Hot lips?
The film follows the plot of the book for the most part, with no strong central plot, but instead was a series of vignettes about life in a MASH unit, the 4077, following the antics of Captain Hawkeye Pierce, Trapper John McIntyre, Duke, Lieutenant Colonel Blake, Majors Burns and Houlihan, Radar, Father Mulchahy, and a bunch of characters who didn't later make the transition to the small screen. With serious life or death situations as a backdrop for wisecracks and pranks, the film was a unique look at a conflict that Hollywood had generally avoided like the plague, but now they had a current war to ignore. So stories about Korea were an easier sell. The film's background conflict could easily be a stand-in for Vietnam, but as long as the V word was never mentioned, everyone was happy. So at a time when many movies were getting TV translations, whether they made sense or not, a television version of MASH was reasonably logical, and US network CBS bought the show.
Finest kind.
Just like Mother used to make.
Like the film, the TV series MASH was about the men and women working in the Mobile Army Surgical Unit 4077, only a few miles from the front line in Korea, that doctors and nurses would engage in what they called meatball surgery, quick and dirty treatment of the seriously wounded soldiers to keep most of them alive until they could be evacuated to safer hospitals for ongoing treatment and recovery. MASH was a goofy comedy that would occasionally focus on the more serious aspects of being in a war zone. And over time, the series would find its feet as a unique, for the time, drama-comedy hybrid. MASH would sometimes make the audience cry with laughter, and at other times, just cry.
I've watched guys die almost every day. Why didn't they ever cry for them?
MASH was developed by Larry Gelbart, who, with fellow executive producer Gene Reynolds, shaped and guided the show's early years. Associate producer Burt Metcalf was also with the series since the beginning, and he would later become the show's executive producer right up until the series' end in 1983. The pilot episode, first broadcast in 1972, written by Gelbart, compressed the events of the movie, and while some early episodes took inspiration from the book and the film, the show would experiment with its format to find out what worked and what didn't. What worked was a mix of zany humour and drama, and a willingness to put up a wall between the two so that one didn't undercut the other. Before MASH, military-themed comedies tended toward being incredibly light and zany. The Phil Silvers Show, Gomer Pyle USMC, McHale's Navy, F-Troop, and Hogan's Heroes all treated military life as one kooky adventure after another. In its formative stages, a TV version of MASH would emulate that style and then pull away from it.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming.
The TV series carried over most characters from the film, though some would be phased out in favour of a core group. Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce was the main character of the series throughout its entire run, appearing in every episode.
Could you hold this, please?
A wisecracking and brilliant surgeon, a womanizer, and probably an alcoholic, Hawkeye's zaniness was a coping mechanism for dealing with the horrors of war.
You're the woman my mother always hoped I'd be.
Alan Alda was a serious actor given a role that would turn him into one of the decade's most iconic actors on television. He was initially concerned it would turn into a pure sitcom like McHale's Navy.
Why don't I trust you guys? Because we're not trustworthy.
But was reassured that it would not be the case, and history was made. Hawkeye would pine for home,
Crabapple Cove, Maine.
become melancholic, depressed, nihilistic, and anarchic. Anything to get through the day.
Make it to go, please. I'd like to drink it in the States.
More and more episodes put the spotlight on Hawkeye.
Pushed me in the water. I hated him so much for that.
As the series wore on, Alda became more involved in the show's production, writing and directing a large number of episodes, and was credited as creative consultant in later seasons.
We can make this movie ourselves.
You can what? We could make it ourselves.
Oh, that's pretty gutsy of you.
Well, Guts is my middle name. Actually, it's kind of disgusting.
Able to switch between snappy banter delivered like Groucho Marx and serious at the drop of a hat, Alda became the show's moral compass.
Easy, Hawkeye, easy.
Don't talk to the driver while he's drinking.
Hawkeye's interests are alcohol, nurses, nudie magazines, and going home.
Oh, wow. The Thompson twins in the buff. They don't look very much alike.
Of course not, they're brother and sister.
As the show matured, Hawkeye never lost his eye for the nurses,
Did you know you had this thing back here?
What thing?
My tongue.
but his advances were more often than not spurned in later years. Alda himself hated the overt womanizing of Hawkeye in the early years, and in later years, when Hawkeye did manage to form a relationship with a woman, it was more often a romance than a one-night stand.
I don't know which one of you is more obscene.
He is. We took a poll.
Captain Trapper John McIntyre was Hawkeye's best friend and partner in crime.
You both look more like bums than doctors.
Actually, I was thinking of becoming a bum doctor, but the proctology class was full.
Married, but that didn't stop him. Trapper John was a little less controlled than Hawkeye, but almost always an easygoing and willing accomplice to the japes and pranks that defined the first year of the series.
No more hatred. Friends. Now shut up, Frank, or I'll kill you.
Trapper's character, though, rarely seemed to transcend the role of Hawkeye's sidekick,
I'll believe that when I'm back home refusing my first house call.
which led to Wayne Rogers leaving the series after 3 seasons.
Figure A is attracted to Figure B and wants to get married, but Figure A is already married to, say, Figure C, and Figure B is engaged to Figure D. But Figure A can't keep his hands off of Figure B because she's got such a great figure.
Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake was the camp's first commanding officer. Henry is himself a surgeon and married with kids. Blake is indecisive, harried by his senior officers, and reliant on his company clerk to keep the camp running. If not smoothly, at least enough to get through the day.
Regimental headquarters. For your eyes only, top secret. Is it?
I didn't think so.
Henry often checks out of his command duties in order to play golf, go fishing, drink, conduct various love affairs, or watch stag movies.
Renee, Loretta, and the parrot and what Yvonne saw. Oh, Radar, you'd be bored to death. I mean, it's all medical stuff.
He also has a very finite story arc, which we'll get to later.
Whatever you do, don't run the risk of catching today's subject.
Do you suppose that someday you could give us a talk on VD?
You think I should?
Why not?
The 4077's chief nurse, Major Margaret Houlihan, was one of 2 characters set up as an antagonist to square off against Hawkeye and Trapper John.
Oh, Burns, you wanted to see me?
Yes, and it's very important.
What's the problem, Frank?
We have a situation that's way out of hand and something has to be done.
Margaret is an army brat, craving the structure and discipline of military life to define herself.
At least that's the way General Barker understands it.
You called
I called General Barker.
Excuse me, I'll get my pen.
And ambitious, she generally only wants to date men of a higher rank.
Major Houlihan.
Early seasons often saw Houlihan as being a favourite of many lecherous senior officers, and along the way she had earned the nickname Hot Lips.
Army regulations forbid any doctor to assist you from undressing into disrobement. Further, they can do nothing when you are alone with them, but give you a good going over.
In the show's first few seasons, Martinet Margaret often formed a double act with one of the camp's doctors, Frank Burns, as political allies, but also a secret couple.
I want to be buried with that sweater, Margaret.
But it was an open secret.
You're really so beautiful the way the sun lights up the hairs in your ear.
Oh, Frank. Frank.
Me too.
Where can we go?
out back of the lard cans.
After that relationship was dissolved, Margaret became more of a human character, still attached to army life, but with a little more perspective. In the middle of the show's run, Margaret was first engaged to and then briefly married to Lieutenant Colonel Donald Penobscot, for Margaret the ultimate trophy husband, though her smug bragging about her husband's achievements would soon turn sour as their doomed long-distance marriage unravelled before the viewer's eyes.
I'm divorced.
After her divorce, is less aloof towards the core characters, but still rides her nursing staff hard. The Hot Lips nickname is also used less and less.
Well, I sure hope so.
It's only the people who know you that don't give you any respect.
Major Frank Burns was a general practitioner in civilian life, but a greedy and barely adequate surgeon in Korea.
How do I rate with you as a surgeon?
Frank, don't you have enough pain?
A coward and a braggart,
Frank, come on, give it up.
What the hell is that?
Frank occupies the third bunk in the swamp as a constant target for Hawkeye and Trapper John's pranks. Frank's affair with Major Houlihan is a twisted situation. He won't leave his wife for Margaret, though she speaks for him when complaining to Colonel Blake about whatever this week's problem is, and generally manipulates him into agreeing with her.
Really, Frank?
Yes. Supply requisitions are not being processed. Duty rosters are late. I can go on for an hour.
I mean, Frank, I never saw your lips move once.
When they are together, they feed into each other's military delusions.
Dear Diary, I can't go to sleep before I tell you about my scrumptious Major F.B.
Once Margaret became engaged to another man, Frank's reactions were all over the place. Sometimes civil, but at other times displayed an extreme jealousy, bordering on harassment, and turned him into a weaselly puddle of snide selfishness, oafish remarks, and just an all-round pain in the arse.
Why do we need another doctor all of a sudden?
Frank, we've been short a doctor here since the day you showed up.
I'm as good a doctor as the next man. Provided the next man is Lou Costello.
Larry Linville left the series after 5 seasons to avoid being typecast any further.
Why would I think it was you?
Because I know people think that that's just the kind of thing I might do.
Well, why did you do it?
Because I felt it was my duty.
I thought you said you didn't do it.
I thought I did too.
As, without Margaret to humanise him somewhat, Frank was just an obnoxious spare part with no redeeming qualities.
I wouldn't let you operate on me for dandruff.
Oh, this is outrageous.
You keep out of this. Where was I?
Surgically and compound.
Let's be honest, we all know weasels like Frank in real life. You know, every third word typed in capital letters.
I've gotten thank you notes from people I said I'd never see again.
Frank Burns has to be the biggest horse's patoot on this post.
You think so?
Company clerk Corporal Walter O'Reilly was nicknamed Radar because he had an ability to hear the choppers bringing in the wounded before anyone else.
This gizmo came disconnected from the thingamabob and it wasn't dripping into the doohickey right.
You lost me with all the technical terms, Radar, but I get the picture.
Radar was the diminutive administrator who kept the camp running when his boss was more or less incapable of doing so.
As you know, it is very difficult to discipline doctors.
Captain Pierce is no exception.
Did I say that?
You were about to, sir.
Radar likes food and feels a little out of his depth around women. He's a dab hand at navigating through army bureaucracy and local black markets, but still naive about relationships. It did take a while for Radar's childlike tendencies to be set in stone. He seems a lot more worldly in the show's first season.
Doesn't Colonel Blake mind you smoking his cigars and drinking his brandy?
Well, I don't mind, and I figure as long as one of us is reasonable.
Radar didn't know his father well, which may explain his need for a father figure, whether it's someone like Hawkeye or the commanding officer of the day.
No.
After the choppers.
What choppers?
Wait for it!
Attention, all personnel!
Radar's a character who worries he's not growing as a person, but he does at least get to the point where he can stand up to the officers when he needs to.
A lot of people look up to you here. They admire you and they kind of feel like they want to be like you. Gee, when you walk out of an operation, they kind of feel like you let them down.
Actor Gary Burghoff left the series at the start of season 8. By then, he was well into his 30s and still playing a teenager. Radar's appearances had become sporadic in recent seasons and Burghoff wanted to move on. But the character and the actor had become indelibly linked together in the minds of many.
Who's ever in there, come on out this minute or I'll yank you out. Do you hear me?
Father Francis Mulchahy was the camp's spiritual advisor, someone to try and make you feel okay about being in Korea, as if that was possible. Though it often felt like he was usually there to refer matters to Hawkeye. In early years, Mulchahy often feels like he's surplus to requirements in the camp.
This'll get you there.
Do not drink wine, or strong drink, thou. I wonder, is there a doctor in the tent.
But his usual cheerful demeanour means he's a huge benefit to the camp's morale. Later years see the character growing by giving him a temper on occasions and the need to feel validated by his military superiors and gain a promotion.
This is the 4th time! Why me?
And later, able to give as good as he gets.
How would you like to get the last rites? And a few left!
All without losing his Boy Scout demeanour. The last of the original characters was Corporal Max Klinger.
Hey, soldier. You forgot your purse.
Jamie Farr was originally only a day player appearing in just a few first season episodes, but he quickly became a viewer favourite.
Father dying, right?
Father dying last year.
Mother dying last year. Mother and father dying.
For much of the series run, Klinger was trying to get out of the army by convincing everyone he was crazy, a type of discharge known as a Section 8, his preferred method of mimicking insanity in order to escape insanity, cross-dressing.
Not now, Marjorie. I'm inspecting the troops.
The constant stream of gags about Klinger's wardrobe became a hit with viewers.
Klinger's not a pervert.
How do you know?
Because I'm one, and he's never at the meetings.
Did you see that little number Klinger was wearing in the mess tent this morning? The tight little green satin job?
Who must have missed it?
Boy, it was a hit saver.
In later years, Klinger just became an ordinary corporal without the dresses, but one still longing to go home to Toledo, Ohio. Though, how he became a corporal, I'll never know. Klinger would eventually take over as company clerk and would find he could use his street smarts to get the job done efficiently.
How would you like to spend 3 hours in a detention cell with a drunken Mongolian pickpocket? He tried to lift my wallet 4 times. 5.
Not bad for someone who was about to murder Frank Burns with a grenade in the first season.
A live grenade?
I thought I'd stick it in the major's ear and find out.
At the end of the show's 3rd season, there was a change in the wind. MacLean Stevenson wanted to leave, and so Henry was written out in a rather permanent way. Having been given a tearful farewell by his former charges, Radar has to make an unpleasant announcement.
Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan.
Henry Blake's death caused a stir when it aired, with the producers responding, "Hey, blame the war." Trapper John was sent home, and his replacement in the swamp, Captain B.J. Hunnicutt, was a married doctor, but unlike most of the other doctors, attempted to stay faithful to his family back home.
It amazes me that a man that can perform miracles in surgery can be so mechanically inept. When I'm loosening a screw, do I go this way or that way?
Much of the 4th season showed BJ acclimating to life in a MASH unit, with the viewer able to experience the horror a little better when viewed with fresh eyes.
Ah! One down.
Who would name their kid BJ?
My mother, B. Hunnicutt, and my father, J. Hunnicutt. B.J.
They allowed Hunnicutt to develop more of an individual character than Trapper John, with Hawkeye and Hunnicutt not averse to fighting with each other on numerous occasions.
I'll never tangle with the master again.
It's more like it.
Colonel Sherman Potter was now in his 3rd war, originally serving as a cavalryman before becoming a doctor.
Beginning at 2200 hours, you are all hereby confined to the Officers' Club for the duration of the whiskey.
Potter is fatherly and wise, not a hard ass for the most part, but not wishy-washy and indecisive like Blake had been.
Pierce shouldn't have pushed you. He should have decked you.
Potter becomes an enthusiastic father figure for Radar and is happy to provide that influence, unlike Henry.
What do you think about getting a tattoo?
Why do I need one?
Sherman is full of war stories and anecdotes and is able to command the respect of the unit far better than Blake was ever able to.
I'm not over here because I'm such a fan of diarrhea.
At the start of his tenure as commanding officer, Potter begins an 18-month countdown before retirement, though in real life that turned out to be 8 years.
Stay happy till I tell you to stop.
Potter was fond of his wife, horses, paintings, and the men and women that served under him, and seemed to be on nickname terms with every senior officer in Korea.
Why am I wasting time like this when I could be sawing wood? Let me put it this way, Burns. Houlihan?
Colonel.
Yes, sir. Dismissed!
Harry Morgan had first appeared in the series playing another character, a blustery general who turns out to be medically unfit for duty.
Non-coms. The backbone of the service. Where are you from, son?
Iowa, sir.
No talking in rank!
The last major character to be introduced was brought in to fill the shoes of Frank Burns in the show's 6th season. Major Charles Emerson Winchester III was a surgeon spending the war luxuriating in Tokyo when he's sent to a MASH unit as a punishment for being a smug braggart.
What is that odor?
North wind cesspool, east wind latrine.
The wind is from the south.
Oh, that's the kitchen.
Winchester comes from old money, is constantly bragging about his pre-war medical career in Boston, or his family's wealth and influence, or his having attended Harvard.
Get me the hell out of here!
Aloof, arrogant, and full of self-assuredness, he likes the finer things in life. So, spending a war in a MASH unit comes as a complete culture shock.
Who wrote that?
Charles Emerson Winchester, while still an undergrad at Harvard.
For a brief time, the series had Charles and Margaret flirting, though MASH never fell into a trap of making replacement characters carbon copies of their predecessors.
Don't forget, gentlemen, that I'm a Winchester.
Write that down. He's a Winchester.
Charles is a completely different character to Frank, and much more able to spar intellectually with Hawkeye and BJ. Winchester is allowed to mellow in the series' twilight, but never loses his sharp tongue or superiority complex.
You're here, so get used to it. You haven't lifted a finger to get me transferred.
Here, your face is finished.
There were other characters who would appear from time to time. Sidney Friedman, a poker buddy and psychiatrist, would often turn up to help with people cracking under the pressure.
No. What's your name, honey?
Hard-headed Colonel Flagg from Intelligence would turn up to complicate matters by being utterly implacable.
Don't play dumb. You're not as good at it as I am.
In the camp, there were a number of background characters who gained more screen time as the show progressed. Nurse Kelly, Igor, Sergeant Zale, Rizzo. But MASH was always about the regulars.
On his honeymoon night, he wrote this song, and it goes like this.
You don't do them singing?
The layout of the MASH unit featured a number of regular locations, starting with the swamp, where the two captains and a major would share a tent, with hot and cold running gags and a still.
Trapper, you want to say hello to my dad?
Hello, Dad. Your son's no good.
The OR and post-op, where most of the more serious scenes would play out, often without the laugh track, and the clerk's office adjoining the CO's office. There was Margaret's tent, or the CO's tent, and of course, the mess, scene of many a culinary disaster. Movie nights, Henry Blake's lectures, and it was even once turned into a bowling alley. An officers' club was added, and later on, Rosie's Bar. The 4077 was somewhere where you could get a drink, like Cheers, and it even had Norm.
When you talk about Hitler, you're really talking about me.
Au contraire, when we talk about you, we're really talking about Hitler.
MASH was a single-camera comedy, meaning that each scene was performed multiple times for each camera setup, like a film.
The men of the 4077th have no time for anything but the vital work they do.
The show's locations were filmed at the Fox Ranch, now Malibu State Park, on outdoor sets originally built for the 1970 movie, and interiors were filmed at 20th Century Fox's soundstage in Los Angeles.
Klinger has damaged over 50% of his body. He broke his nose.
Of course, while there was no studio audience during filming, most episodes feature a laugh track added in post-production, as was the custom for single-camera comedies. The producers originally didn't want a laugh track at all, but in the end compromised with the network by agreeing that they wouldn't add laughter to scenes in the operating room. You can see the show's shifting balance of comedy and drama as more and more episodes manage to go for very long stretches without the fake laughs. Sometimes entire episodes have no laughter added.
The beans, I wouldn't give them to my neighbor's dog. In fact, they're so old, they're has-beens.
In an era where comedy without a laugh track or a studio audience was practically non-existent, this was quite an innovation. It never hurts the show when there are no laughs. In some TV markets, such as the UK, the show was originally screened without the laugh track, and there is an option on some home video releases to watch without the laughter.
Captain Alvin Mercer leaves for a honeymoon in Tokyo at 0900 hours. Any nurse wishing to be the bride, please contact the captain. No experience necessary.
On many episodes, there are PA announcements providing some relief from the drama with one-liners, except there's no indication who's making these announcements, since they'd been made from the clerk's office where Radar and later Klinger are usually to be found. Maybe it's a ghost.
Attention all personnel. We've got people coming in, folks, with more wounded give them their pride. Let's go, as in now.
MASH would play with the format in various episodes. A popular framing device was to have somebody writing a letter home.
Dear Dad. Dearest Mildred.
Dear Mom.
Dear Dad.
Dear Sigmund.
Dear comrade.
Dear Sis.
Dear Uncle Abdul.
Dear Dad.
Almost every character had at least one episode where they described the life in the camp and their comrades to friends, family and colleagues back home. The most notable examples were the Dear Dad episodes from the first seasons, where Hawkeye wrote his father.
Coming to you from the mess tent now. Not a bad place to eat if you like cold dishes. Like steak, lamb chops, stew, soup, coffee.
Episodes took the form of newsreels, another told purely from the point of view of an injured soldier, another in real time. MASH wasn't your common or garden sitcom.
Men are men and women are women. You start mixing them up and you won't be able to tell who's who.
Another way to mix drama and comedy in one show was to have multiple storylines. So you might have a main storyline of a serious medical problem or ethical dilemma, often without too many jokes, and a B story with the zaniness ramped up.
All you two guys do is walk around all day telling jokes. What the hell's so funny about that?
It's a horse. I'm about to paint his back end. Fortunately, I have a live-in model.
And viewers didn't seem to mind.
I fail to see how this damning testimony establishes my client's guilt or innocence.
Well, you're the only one, Major.
MASH wasn't a hit in its first season, and it was in danger of cancellation. But CBS kept at it, and in the show's second season, with a new time slot, the show found an audience that grew and grew over time. An audience so big that even when the show was starting to run on fumes, the ratings kept the series running for years.
This jerk tore my book apart.
Because this jerk was reading till 2 in the morning.
You're all acting like jerks. You stay out of this.
The show was almost wound up in its 10th season, but Alan Alda was persuaded to do another year to wrap up the show. A shorter 11th season ended with the feature-length movie Goodbye, Farewell and Amen, and is still one of the most watched television events in US TV history. It's less a comedy than a straight look at these people as the war reached its stalemate ending and the crew prepared to go home.
It sounds like my cab is here.
Yeah.
So,
MASH never wants to commit to when the series is actually set. The Korean War began in June 1950 and ended in July 1953. MASH, meanwhile, ran 11 seasons over 256 episodes. Trying to work out a MASH timeline will make your head explode.
I don't want to butt in, but he can't resist.
Episodes give out dates and reference real-world events in a way that is about as linear as a left turn, made worse by the show running far longer than its setting, and of course, the many cast changes.
Buffalo bagels. Did you get at those weekly reports, or are you just sitting there with your feet up smoking my cigars?
Working, sir.
Movies, songs and celebrities of the 50s are name-checked, but sometimes they're films and songs that came out after the war had ended. Examples like references to Godzilla or The Blob.
I think we should tell the Colonel.
Various minor details about the characters took a few years to solidify, but even so, the anachronisms probably won't spoil your enjoyment of the show unless you're really picky about such things. Oops.
And these two are at the top of my list.
Hey, we finished first and second.
MASH wears its heart on its sleeve, and in later years, it's often Alan Alda's heart.
Can't blame this on the war. Can't blame it on anything.
It's the sort of show that millions of viewers have enjoyed, and a significant number of whom will possibly have missed the point.
About all a man has that he can call his own are his values.
Above all, MASH is a show about compassion and empathy. Frank has none of those traits. He's the antithesis of the show's moral compass, a common character type in comedy.
Well, there's no reason for being poor. And if they had any gumption, they'd be out looking for a job instead of always scrounging around in our garbage cans for food.
Not an actual villain, but a regular character who's pretty much always representing the wrong point of view. I mean, there's a reason he's called Ferret Face.
Now, I'll be a catch that ugly creep that's been using my face.
The later seasons do allow the characters to become more human. Margaret, while still yearning for military precision, becomes a little more pragmatic about life in a war zone.
One night I was at a party drinking and dancing, and the next morning I was in a war in charge of 10 nurses, and the party was over.
Charles, yearning to be sent back to the comforts of Tokyo, does realize he doesn't want to do it on the backs of his colleagues.
But I will not, even for a return to that Pearl of the Orient, Tokyo, lie to protect you while destroying a friend's career.
Klinger takes over as company clerk from Radar and becomes a very effective company clerk and part of the inner circle, even gaining a promotion to sergeant, and despite his schemes to get sent home, eventually decides to stay in Korea at the war's end.
You have no brothers.
Whoever said that was lying.
You said that.
Right, I was lying, sir.
Hunnicutt becomes less co-conspirator to Hawkeye and often is at loggerheads with the man who calls him his best friend.
Do you have any idea how tough it is to live in the same shoebox with a couple of irrational jackasses?
Yeah, I know. They were just complaining how tough it is to live with one.
And Hawkeye becomes less the person that everyone looks up to and more the guy that people in the camp can barely tolerate. Some later seasons feel almost like life imitating art, in that while the characters are expressing their depression with the constant grind of being bored or overwhelmed by the masses of wounded soldiers, it also seems a little like the actors felt they were imprisoned by their success.
Henry Blake. Rest in peace, Henry.
The show would pivot away from focusing too much on Pierce and give the other cast members more of a chance to shine in dramatic episodes. David Ogden Stiers, Farrell, Swit and Morgan all put in amazing performances in their spotlight episodes. Burghoff and Farr also add a human dimension to their enlisted characters.
Gentlemen, the snow pageant is fatuous and unamusing. It serves only as a reminder that it is hot.
You know, he's right. It doesn't work without the plastic marshmallows.
There are episodes where the weather is too hot and others where the weather is too cold. Apparently, working in the heat at the Fox Ranch was hard work, and so when writers became tired of actors' notes, they would write episodes set in a blizzard so that the cast would have to rug up and pretend to be freezing when the opposite was true.
How can you wear that big, thick suit in front of all these frostbite patients?
A little bulk him, and I think I can manage.
A constant theme of the show is the army way of doing things.
Don't anybody touch her, she may be booby-trapped.
Which is not always the most logical, humane, smartest, or efficient way of prosecuting a war.
Fire ceremonial salute.
But, sir, the angle.
Fire the salute, Private.
The Army, in its infinite wisdom, has not only cleared Frank of the charges, they have assigned him to a veterans hospital in Indiana and promoted him to lieutenant colonel.
MASH, being the smash success it eventually was, had several spin-offs. Firstly, there was a medical dramedy following an older John McIntyre, Trapper John MD, which ran for 7 seasons. And then, following MASH's finale, there were 2 seasons of a follow-up series, After MASH, which saw Potter, Father Mulchahy and Klinger working together in a hospital in civilian life after the war. And lastly, there was a pilot for an unproduced series following Radar in civilian life, Walter.
Put him in a body cast from his chest to his toes until he broke his leg.
MASH, being a staple of the schedules for so long, featured a lot of familiar faces for the time, but some in particular have remained a little more notable. It's always fun to point them out, and that's just the ones that I picked up.
Skip dessert.
MASH has remained popular, beloved by people who grew up with it, rediscovered by new generations.
My father touched me like that once. To this day, he still has to wear orthopedic shirts.
I personally remember growing up with the show, with episodes stripped 5 nights a week, while new episodes were screened in prime time. I fell off the series after the finale aired, and while I caught an episode here and there in the intervening years, I loved it, but I said I would always love to sit down and rewatch the whole series start to finish. Well, this video is the result.
Of course, Pierce and McIntyre have been no help. Last night, they filled my foxhole with peas and carrots.
Oh, dear.
And then they put a whoopee cushion in my helmet liner.
Some of the standout episodes for me were ones that I remembered from viewing when I was much younger, and others have stuck with me when watching it now as an adult.
I simply cannot eat the same food every day. Fish, liver, day after day. I've eaten a river of liver and an ocean of fish.
Adam's Rib, where Hawkeye and Trapper John wheel and deal in order to get a shipment of spare ribs and sauce sent to their unit in Korea.
Incoming wounded.
Big Mac, where the camp is in a frenzy when General MacArthur is to inspect the 4077. Abyssinia Henry, where Henry Blake gets his orders to return home.
There were no survivors.
Welcome to Korea, which introduced BJ and Sherman Potter.
Don't forget to water the flowers.
I missed Trapper by 10 minutes. 10 lousy minutes.
Captain Pierce?
Hi. On your feet, soldier. I'm Colonel Potter.
Oh, boy.
The Bus, where a bus carrying Hawkeye, BJ, Frank, Potter and Radar is lost in the woods.
Any Allied personnel have begun to take prisoners.
Who wants to stand guard over the prisoner first?
He does.
will.
I do.
Fine. If you don't accidentally shoot yourself first, I'll relieve you in 2 hours. If you do, I'll relieve you earlier.
The nurses. Margaret is at war with her nursing staff.
Did you ever offer me a lousy cup of coffee?
Goodbye, Radar. Radar is given a discharge on compassionate grounds and debates whether to go home or stay.
Sir, with all due respect to your colonelness, you can't order me to go.
5 o'clock Charlie. A trainee North Korean pilot uses the 4077 for target practice.
Count off!
1,
2.
That's about it.
Sometimes you hear the bullet. Hawkeye's writer friend enlisted as a GI to write a book about war, but instead became a casualty himself.
I heard the bullet coming.
Comrades in arms. Margaret and Hawkeye are trapped in enemy territory when the final wall between them breaks down.
Well, I'm sure they're all right. They must be going through hell out there.
Tuttle. Having invented a fake officer, Hawkeye has to kill him off.
We can all be comforted by the thought that he's not really gone. That there's a little Tuttle left in all of us.
The Joker is wild.
You and Trapper were quite the duo, huh?
Yes, we were.
BJ tires of hearing stories about pranks pulled by Hawkeye and Trapper John and throws down the gauntlet.
The best joke of all was the joke that never came.
There are so many great episodes and memorable moments, but the show went out on a high with the feature-length finale, Goodbye, Farewell and Amen. It's a bittersweet ending to the show. The war is over, but they aren't untouched. Hawkeye is in a mental facility being treated by old friend Sidney Friedman.
Remember when I was a kid, you always told me if my head wasn't attached to my shoulders, I'd lose it? Well...
Father Mulchahy loses his hearing, and Klinger decides to get married and stay in Korea. It's a touching and fitting way to say goodbye to the show.
There's nothing here I'm gonna miss. Except you.
Before MASH, there had been some big final episodes on US television, such as The Fugitive or The Mary Tyler Moore Show, but MASH's ending would be the one that every TV show for decades would use as a yardstick for how to do a final show. Alda was not the only cast member to contribute to the show behind the scenes. MacLean, Stevenson and Mike Farrell wrote a few episodes each, and behind the cameras, Farrell and Harry Morgan each directed several episodes, with David Ogden Stiers and Jamie Farr also getting a chance to call the shots on an episode or two.
We order rectal thermometers, we get spark plugs. Both useful articles, but hardly interchangeable.
The show itself grows, treating the nurses better over time. Originally making jokes about Margaret getting poured at by a randy doctor, to later on having the nurses pushing back against the status quo of the 50s. In the episode Inga, the male doctors are unable to deal with a woman MD, with Hawkeye surprisingly enough having the hardest time.
Sitting here listening to you spout your bilge, I get a picture clear and sharp of the world's most perfect ass.
Are you referring to me?
I'm referring to me.
Suicide is painless.
One of the series' many iconic elements is the theme tune that opens the show. Originally created for the movie by composer Johnny Mandel with lyrics by Robert Altman's son Mike, the song Suicide is Painless has become a standard for anyone interested in learning to play a folkish sounding song that people actually recognise. It sounds almost the same throughout the series' entire run, but was actually subtly re-recorded with a similar arrangement almost every season.
Everybody says you're a virgin. Is that true?
I really don't know.
MASH holds up incredibly well, and while there does get to be a sense of déjà vu and repetition in later years, it's never less than a well-made series, with sharp dialogue, fantastic acting. It's one of those evergreen series that will be watched, rewatched, discovered and rediscovered and loved by new generations of viewers.
Can I see you both?
If you stand in a box, you can.
Nice!
Did you call me doctor?
Why should I call you doctor? I'm the surgeon.
There are people who prefer the original crew and people who are BJ and Potter era fans. People who like cross-dressing Klinger or GI Klinger. Frank fans versus Winchester windbags. Cool, smart-ass Hawkeye versus unlikable asshole Hawkeye. Or, more critically, clean-shaven BJ Hunnicutt versus cheesy mustachioed BJ Hunnicutt of later years.
But it's my considered opinion that no one's going to believe that you're pregnant.
Me personally, having gone back to the swamp for the first time in many years, I've loved every minute of it. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.